It is a great honor, and it's always such an honor and privilege to be joined by this guy. Of course, me and many people listening, lifelong fans of his band Rush, and it's been far too long since we've had an on-the-record conversation or discussion or even just a hello, and it's great to see him because we're doing this on Zoom as well. Joining me is legendary guitarist Alex Lifeson. Alex, wonderful to see you and talk to you. How have you been? How you doing? Okay?
Good, Eddie. Really good, actually. It's been, such a difficult time for all of us in this past year of the pandemic. And it's nice to be coming through it and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and reconnecting with everybody and starting to live life again.
You know, we're doing this on Zoom and people will be able to see this on the SiriusXM app when it's posted. But as we were talking during the commercial break before we came on, I'm looking at your backdrop and it looks like a guitar store of some sort. And I'm seeing all these amazing guitars behind you. I said, Alex, are you in a guitar center or where are you? And you said this is actually a home studio that you have. For the audience watching, explain where you're at a little bit.
Well, I've always had a home studio, but generally it's been in a house. We moved recently in March, and the library that was in this apartment, I converted into a studio. So I had the room treated for sound, and I brought in a bunch of my old analog gear and a bunch of guitars from my house in the country, and set myself up here. And it's great. It's a great working environment. We're up on the 25th floor with a beautiful view of the outlying area around Toronto, right downtown. And it's an exciting, inspiring place to work. And certainly that's been the case in the last little while. It's been pretty active around here.
So do you use that space just to work or do you live there as well?
Well, if you ask my wife, I live in here right now. No, this is our apartment. We actually live here, and it's just one of the rooms that, I had in our last place. We had an office that we shared, so it was okay. But I would drive Charlene crazy working in there, and I didn't want to work on headphones. And so when we decided to move and have a little more space, I thought for sure I've got to have a nice working environment. And that's exactly what I have here. I love it. It's a very accurate room. It's really tight. So I'm hearing everything that I want to hear from the speakers. And I've been able to do some really good work here, not only playing and recording, but also some mixing.
Well, real quickly, how many guitars do you have? Because behind you, I can see at least a dozen, it looks like, but in your guitar arsenal over the decades, I imagine you're a bit of a guitar nerd, like many guitar players. Do you have a warehouse, so to speak? Do you have a stash of them? Have you collected rare guitars? We all know I had Geddy on for his bass book, and Geddy's been on with me a couple times about that book, and we all know the passion he has for the bass. Are you the same when it comes to guitars? Do you have that same sort of passion for the instrument, and do you have a big collection like Geddy does?
I never started out to be a collector, and although I've collected some instruments of sort of some kind of value in terms of the vintage or the particular model, I was never a big collector. Now, of course, 45 years later, these brand new guitars that I got back then are vintage instruments. So I probably have, let's see, you're pretty close. I have 17 guitars here on the wall. I have another 8 acoustics on the other side of my desk here. And then in the corner, I've got my mandola and mandolin. I've got a banjo over here, much to my wife's dismay. And so I have a violin here. I have lots of really great instruments that I can utilize and work with. I probably have a total of somewhere around 120 instruments. Geddy, on the other hand, I think is around 350. And he did a lot of collecting when he was preparing for his book. And he had also collected some six-string instruments as well. So, but he is a collector. He's always been that way. His baseball memorabilia collection is amazing. And so he's got that bug.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. So you talk about this workload that you're doing and having this studio and the flexibility to be able to record and create when you want to, which is wonderful. You know, I think to the outside fan, between COVID, between losing Neil, between the band retiring, everything that's gone on with you in recent years, the perception might be, well, those guys are just off the radar. They're not doing anything. They're not writing. They're not recording. It sounds like the opposite, even though it really hasn't been public to this point. The opposite actually has been pretty much true, has it not? Because it sounds like we know we've got two songs coming. We know we've got some stuff that we're going to talk about coming down the line. But it sounds like you've taken recent years to really maybe go into the studio and record and write, whether it be for yourself or other artists. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've always written on my own. I think when really the germ of Victor, which is 25 years now, it
Amazing.
really happened because Ged was expecting his second child and he wanted to take a year off, and I didn't want to sit around and not do anything, and so I started working on that project. And I have a lot of material from then that I recorded over the years, and I'd like to release it slowly on my website, a little bit at a time, and just take this little trip down my own uh, musical memory lane. I think that'd be kind of fun to share some of those ideas. They're sort of demos and maybe more produced demos, but it's an indication of where I was at musically at that time. With the more current stuff, when we finished the tour in 2015, I started writing almost immediately. I wanted to keep, my chops. I wanted to keep in shape, and so a lot of these tracks, including the two that are on the website, were written, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago initially. And of course, I dick around with them over and over and over again. I replace tracks, I add things, take things out, I remix them a couple thousand times. But I guess at the end of the day, it's all about keeping active within the scope of what I know how to do and have experience and have done for a long time. And it's really, really satisfying. It don't need to promote it or anything like that when I'm doing it. It's more an exercise to keep me in shape. Of course, now, after enjoying my retirement for the last 5 years, everything's changed in these last 2 weeks. I avoided social media forever. I was very, protective of my privacy, and I didn't want to get involved with the way it works, with all the crazy stuff that goes on. I started this website so that we could have access to a lot of things, including providing some of my music, and my Instagram account, which is a new thing for me. And it's been super active, and it coincides with the release of the guitar and everything. And we kind of had to do it, but it's been a fascinating couple of weeks, getting lots of activity and interest on that account, and lovely comments from people that are happy to know that I'm still alive and still doing things.
Well, I wasn't aware you had an Instagram, so I'm glad you said it, and we'll let our audience know so they follow you. Is it just your name? Is it at Alex Lifeson?
It's the real Lurkst.
Oh, okay. Let me guess. Somebody had Alex Lifeson and wanted $1 million to give it to you.
Probably. I didn't bother looking into that, but the real Lurkst works fine because I am
All
the
right.
real Lurkst.
Yes, well, we will definitely look that up, and I'll be sure to follow you. And it's never too late to dive into the wacky world of social media, Alex.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to look at the comments, you have to have a thick skin, but otherwise you can just have some fun and post on it. But
Yeah.
I would think the vast majority of people following you, it's nothing but love, as it should be. Hey, let me ask you about the last few years, about your health. Now, you mentioned the R40 tour, and I know at that time we had done an interview, and you had done an interview with Rolling Stone, and you had mentioned you were dealing with some issues with arthritis. You talked about some medication that was helping you. I know that at times it may have impacted your playing a little bit on the last tour. How are you now? How is your health now with that, and overall, how do you feel?
I miss working out. I kind of have not uh, followed my regimen like I normally would, which is, working out a few days a week with a trainer, I love it because I hate it and I don't want to do it, but because he's there, I gotta go. And as soon as that was over with the pandemic, I was like, okay, great, I'll see him next time. And I really missed that. You know, I play golf and tennis was off limits until recently. Um, in terms of my general health, I mean, my health is great. Yeah, I have, psoriatic arthritis. I've had it for many years, and I'm really fortunate. I started taking care of it early on, and a lot of the medication available for sufferers of arthritis have really come a long way in the last years. These biologics work incredibly well, and I'm on two particular ones, so they work great. They really help my fingers a lot. I don't have any complaints or any issues. Once in a while, there's some inflammation, and it's a little harder, but it works out. And so long as I keep moving and active, it's not bad at all. And compared to some people, it's nothing. I'm fine. I don't even really think about it. So
That's great to hear because you know you hear all sorts of things from guitar players and these musicians that we know and love as they get older. Today
yep,
alone, Frank Marino, a Canadian guitar player who's
yep.
quite legendary, announced he's not going to be able to tour for undisclosed medical issues. So it's great to hear some positive news about health because we're all getting older and we all have to watch it and take care of ourselves. But especially you being a guitar player, that you know having some issues with your hands or wrists or fingers obviously could be a scary thing, I would think.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but at the same time, I find that you know your brain is a powerful thing. um, Sometimes it's a stupid thing, but generally it's pretty powerful, and you can work around these sort of issues. I just tell myself it's nothing, and I can trick myself that way. I'm easily tricked, in fact. So it's really not bad at all.
You talk about the workaround. Last thing on this, I was a few years ago. I had the honor of touring with Deep Purple and hosting their shows, and we went through Mexico together. And Steve Morse, who's been their guitar player for like 20 years, I was watching him. I was in the dressing room pre-show, and what he was doing to his hands and his wrists, and the way he was taping and putting lotion, and he was telling me of all these issues he has, and that now Steve has completely changed the way he plays guitar, the way he actually holds chords and fingers things because he physically can't do it that way anymore. So there are, I guess, and I'm not a musician, but I guess there are workarounds that maybe in some ways even reinvent your playing to a degree that you are kind of forced to do as you get older, whether it's drummers notoriously have issues with joints and shoulders or whatever, or guitar players, it's not uncommon.
Yeah, no, I guess it's not. But everybody deals with it in a different way. For Steve, that guy played all the time. I remember when we were working together, we'd show up for sound check at 4 o'clock, and he'd already be at the venue, walking around the building, just playing his guitar. He must have played for hours and hours and hours before doing the show on any given night. The guy was so disciplined, and I really admired that. I wish I could have done the same thing. But maybe it's a good thing because my fingers aren't so bad and his are. So I win.
Alex, how's the reaction been to people were so excited to get Cobble Blues and Spy House a week or so ago, just because not only are they wonderful songs, but it just showed people that the Rush fans, the world is just dying for stuff from you and Getty at this point, individually, together, whatever it may be. So it just felt great to have something new to talk about from Alex Lifeson. The response to the songs now that they've been out there for a little bit, what have you been hearing from fans?
Very positive. The quirky songs. Pebble Blues started out as a blues song. They're all exercises for me, and I generally do these things just to keep my chops and keep active and keep active as a songwriter as well. So I started out as I thought I'd like to do something bluesy today. So I put down a drum pattern, and then I started manipulating the drum pattern so it was a little quirkier. And then I think I started playing a solo over, like a bluesy solo over that beginning, and then building all the other stuff. And then it took this Eastern kind of turn. And there was that element of it, hence the name Kabul Blues. Once I sort of got this arrangement in shape, I looked at the background and I thought that it would be so cool to make this deep and mysterious and dark, and start doing all kinds of trippy, psychedelic stuff, lots of backwards guitar and little quirky things that run off. And that was really a wonderful creative exercise, creating a lot of those sounds, because most of them, there are a couple of sampled sounds here and there, but most of them I created myself just by getting in the right mood, and then fooling around with all the technical stuff to create those colorings and atmospherics and shading. And the combination of those three approaches, I think, really works in an interesting Alex Lifeson sort of way.
And Spy House, same sort of thing?
Spy House was the same sort of thing. Again, it was just, what can I do with this simple riff, and how can I make it more interesting? And it started out as it does, and then it goes into this, sort of glorious chorus of orchestrated parts, and again, it was just building and layering and throwing on some vocal samples, and then a typical solo that you don't hear very much anymore these days. So, and it's only 2 minutes long, or 2.5 minutes long. So it was a really a fun little exercise to do that one. All of these songs are going to be included in the Envy of None project. And Maya has already done a vocal for Kabul Blues, which is really, really cool. And she's got some ideas for a couple of the other songs. So just waiting for those as we're mixing them now as well.
So this news came out, I guess, a day or two ago in an interview. Envy of None is going to be, just for clarity, is Envy of None a new band? Is it a project? Is it the name of an Alex Lifeson solo record? Fill the fans in on exactly what Envy of None, which is a great name, by the way. I mean, not something anybody wants to be, but it's kind of funny. Tell me about Envy of None and exactly what it is.
So it's a project, really. It started out with Andy Curran. Andy played in a band called Coney Hatch. They were a popular Canadian band in the 80s and 90s, and they had some success. And he worked at Anthem Records for many years as our A&R guy there. So we have a long history with Andy. And when we came off the road in 2015, Andy was working on some stuff on his own. He was looking to get some music on, placements for TV and film. And he reached out and asked if I would play some guitar stuff on some of the things that he'd written. And they were all just rough demos at the time. And I love doing that sort of thing. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I did, worked on a song and didn't hear anything for a while. And then I heard from him, and he said, I got another song if you don't mind. And sure, I'll do that. And I did that. And we had another singer that was a female singer that was on the early versions of a couple of those songs. And then he came across Maya, and they decided to do some work together. And then that started growing, and he introduced me to Maya. And then I used Maya for a project that I did with Marco Miniman a couple of years ago for a song called Lover's Calling. And she did a fantastic job on that. Her voice is very soft, delicate, fragile, but she's very bright. Her lyrics are very, very thoughtful and great imagery. And that contrasted so well to the kind of music that we were writing together. And even though it started out casually and we were using plugins and not taking it too very seriously, it all changed when Maya came along, and then we started really building the tracks. Alf Annabellini is also involved, and Alf is he's a guitar player and also an engineer at Metalworks, and he teaches engineering arts. So with the four of us, we shared files. It started moving around. Then we started updating the files and getting a little more serious about how we were recording. And then more songs started to develop. And so now, well, I guess about 4 years later, after the very beginning, we're in the final mix stages. We have a couple of things that we're waiting for Maya lyrically or vocally to just drop into the mixes, and then we're set to go. So hopefully, I don't know, I was going to say later this summer, but more likely sometime in the fall, we should have everything done. It's 10 songs. We want to release it as an album. It's very challenging these days. I didn't realize the record industry was gone and has been replaced by something I don't recognize at all. So it's we're trying to determine how we're going to move forward on this. We have the interest of a couple of companies that would like to have a listen and see if there's something that they could do. But at one way or another, we'd like to get this music out before the end of this year. And I'm really, really excited about it. It's really quite different. A lot of it is dark and menacing. Some of it is poppy, but in a very cool sort of hip way. Some is countryish. Some is ballady, but it's not. I don't know. It's not in a very kind of traditional way. There's some really great stuff, and I was very, very experimental with a lot of the guitar sounds that I did, trying to create textures and atmospherics that are not guitar centric. I mean, there's lots of guitar playing on it, but it's always so much fun for me to try to create sounds and tones and colorings with the guitar without it sounding like a guitar.
So, Alex, you're talking about putting out this new music, and again, it's called Envy of None. There will be an album, as you said, coming towards the end of the year. And you made a comment about not recognizing the music industry and what it is now. And I've, a lot of my friends that are in the business as well, who have been in for a very long time, like you, have the same sentiment. It's kind of hard to process what it is now. The one underlying thing that people take away is where it's at is live. Like if you don't go out on the road and play to promote and support something, you're going to sell the first couple days to your hardcore base, and then it's pretty much going to go off the radar. So to that end, when this comes out, do you have a desire to go out and play live with this band that you're assembling?
That's a good question. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't think so. We've talked a little bit about it, but we don't want to, get too far ahead of what we really need to do, and is concentrate on finishing the record and getting it out. Maya is a lot younger than any of us are. She's in her early mid-20s, and she would love to take this out on the road and do a proper tour. And it all depends on how it goes. If there's a good response, then maybe we'll look at it. And I would probably at least consider a handful of shows. I'm not saying that we are, but at that time, I would think about it anyways, if it was limited to something like that. But frankly, after 40 years of touring and half a dozen years before that playing bars and living in crappy hotels or even small hotel bars and all of that, I don't have much of a desire to be sitting in a hotel room staring at the TV, for 22 hours of the day for the 2 hours of excitement. And I don't really miss the live experience. I've done it a few times since in like a smaller venues, smaller projects, some mostly charity stuff. And it's fun, when it's for a couple hundred people, and I don't mind. But to do the whole big production, I'm not so sure. I'm very lazy by nature. I don't know if I'd want to, dive into that again.
So, what's interesting about that, when R40 happened, and I've said this many, many times, to me, there's no band that ended on a better note and ended in a better way than Rush. And I'm not saying that because you're just sitting here. I've said that repeatedly. I see so many bands that, in my opinion, stay too long at the party. When they finally do play their final tour, it's a shell of what the band was. Maybe there's one original guy. We see it too much. With Rush, it couldn't have been more different. I went to the show in Denver. I remember I interviewed you there. The set, the way it was constructed, the way the band sounded was just incredible. What's interesting about what you're saying is that that being the final tour largely attributed to, at the time, Neil not wanting to continue. But it sounds like, and I've never heard your take on this, maybe around that point you were kind of okay with it winding down as well. If you were at that point somewhat fatigued by touring, that you were kind of okay also with that being the last tour as it turned out to be.
Well, we were in our early 60s when that tour ended. Um, I, after the number of dates that we did do, which was about half of what we would normally do, we were all starting to feel the fatigue as you normally would. And we would, had it been a normal tour, we would have gone out for probably another month and then taken a month off, then picked it up, or maybe a couple months off, and then picked it up for another 3 or 4 months. I personally, and I think the same for Ged, we were really excited about the show, the presentation of the show, the whole concept of, going back through our history. I thought we were all playing really, really well. And I probably could have continued to do another 30 shows. And I think Geddy felt the same way, but it was becoming really difficult for Neil to play at that level. And unless he could play 100% at that level, he really didn't want to do any more shows. And he didn't want to be that person that should have, taken it. And it was hard for him. 3-hour show playing the way he played. It's a miracle that he was even able to play. And he had some issues through that tour. He had an infection in his feet and he could barely walk, never mind, playing a bass drum the way he did, and never complained or anything like that. So it was time. And in retrospect, it couldn't have been better because we were playing great. And we finished on such a high note. Fans were so happy. I mean, with the performance, all things were right. That was the great way to ensure our legacy and be remembered for those guys, for being that band that played that way. I honestly would hate to be working now, for example, and not being able to play a song because my fingers are just killing me, and not playing as well and making all those mistakes. I made enough mistakes, but now way too many. So all in all, it really turned out to be the opportune time for us to end a long career. Not a lot of bands lasted 40 years of that regular touring and many, many, many albums and all of that stuff. So it was a
And the
great
same
trip.
guys. And the
And the
same
same,
guys. That's unprecedented. So that's remarkable as well.
yeah.
Yeah, it truly is. What's funny is you're talking about like how you're fine with not being on the road. So when Geddy was on with me for the book a couple times, I had asked him what he had been up to, and he said to me that he had been doing a lot of traveling. And I said, my God, after like 50 years traveling, are you insane? Like, I would think I'd want to be like you in your bunker there, just like shutting the world out. And he said, no, he said, the difference is obviously when we traveled for Rush, it was get to the gig, get to the hotel, get to the gig. He said, now I'm enjoying taking photos and being with my wife and spending time in the cities and getting out there. So, and then when he put it in that perspective, I understood what he was talking about. So do you travel in that way now? Have you been able to do things with your family and take advantage of some stuff in recent years that normally after dedicating your life to Rush, you wouldn't be able to do?
Somewhat, not to the extent that he does. I really admire Geddy for the way he does travel now. Quite often he'll do a trip for a month and he'll pick some locations that they'll go to. And he really, he really gets everything he can out of it. He's a birder, so he enjoys photographing birds, and he's a history buff. And, he really makes the most out of those trips that he does. We don't travel to that extent. I did a trip, certainly for the last year and a half, we haven't been traveling at all. But prior to that, we did a trip to Italy, and I've been to Italy a bunch of times. But what was nice about this trip is my wife and I went with our 2 sons and their partners, and we spent a week, but it was a whirlwind trip, and we really packed a lot of great stuff into it. And the fact that it was family and an adult family, because my kids are very grown up. Boy, I'll never forget that. We, lots of great photographs, but the memories I have from the nights and the meals and the things that we saw and the experiences we had, it was really, really indelible. I'll remember it forever.
Well, before I run out of time with you, let me ask you about this guitar, because you have a new Epiphone that is coming out. Tell everybody about the new signature guitar that is it released or about to be released? Give us the details about it.
Yeah, no, it was released a couple of weeks ago. In 2011, I designed or co-designed a Gibson guitar that, they wanted me to do a signature series, and it's easy to put your name on it and just stick it out there and you sell it because it's got your name on it. But if we were going to do a signature guitar, I really wanted it to be a guitar that I would want to buy. And we spent quite a bit of time, about 2 years, creating this guitar with all the features that I wanted on it, which included a vibrato arm and a piezo pickup, so that I could get an acoustic guitar sound, coil splitters to clean up the sound, make it a little thinner, just really lots of variety. And now 10 years later, Epiphone wanted to release that same guitar on the Epiphone platform. So a much more a different price point, easier access for beginners particularly. And I think they hit it out of the park. This guitar is beautiful. It feels great. All those features are there. It works great. And my understanding is they sold out the first production run in 2 weeks, and they're scrambling to ramp up for the next production run. So all things great with that. And I had fun doing an ad for it. I didn't want to do something with an ad company and slick and all of that stuff. So basically, I just wrote copy out about my history with the guitar and what it meant to me growing up to have a good guitar, and especially a Gibson that I'd always admired, and added some photographs on, Final Cut and some video. And then we had an editor smooth everything out and make it look real. But I love the fact that it was my creation, and we got a team together to do it from my end. And it was very down to earth and very much like me. And I wanted it to be sort of a casual conversation with the listener. And it worked out great. And I think it's really quite unique for anything that Gibson does. They have some beautiful slick ads, but this was something a little more organic. And I think it's worked out great. Hence the songs. That also gave me a place to put Kabul Blues and Spy House in the background with all this stuff. And then Gibson wanted to re-release those songs in their full versions. So that led to where we are today.
Alex, what was your very, very first guitar? How old were you when you got it? And do you still have it?
I don't have it. It was a Kent acoustic guitar. It was $10. My parents bought it for me one year for Christmas, I think in 1966. And I had that guitar for a year. And it was so hard to play. The action was very high on it. But I did. Every day I played it. And I asked them for an electric guitar the following year for Christmas. And I got a Kenora, which was originally made in Japan for a Canadian distributor. And it was a very inexpensive guitar as well. I think it was $59. It was a semi-acoustic, and it didn't sound particularly great, but I still have it. And I'm restoring it actually now. Wow. to bring it back to its former glory. Like, Geddy and he had a Kenora bass. We painted our guitars. We were so inspired by Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton and their beautiful instruments that were painted in that period in the 60s. So we thought we would do our own. So we painted them day glow green and or orange and purple, and stuck all kinds of fluorescent tape and things on it. It looked ridiculous, but they were totally cool. And now we've just taken it right down to the wood, and I'm going to get the finish back to the way it was. So
You know, can you tell us like what your relationship like is now with Getty? Because obviously you've been partners in this thing for so many decades. And now obviously he's doing some things on his own. You're doing some things on your own. As you know, there's a large segment of your fan base that would love to see at some point you guys do something together in some way, shape, or form. But I also would imagine after working with any musical partner for as many decades as you did, it's kind of liberating and fun to be able to do something outside of the expected confines of what you would do with that person or the umbrella of Rush. So I can see it kind of cutting both ways. I'm sure you could appreciate the fans being like, well, we need something together. But then at the same token, if you take a step back from it, if you've been doing that for your whole life, to be able to all of a sudden say, hey, well, I can do something a little experimental or something that maybe that wouldn't fit under the Rush umbrella, that it's, as a musician, that's got to be really feel great to be able to do. So if you can address that a little bit as far as that balance of trying to keep the Rush fans happy and maybe at some point, if you feel it, collaborate with Get again versus doing things with Andy and other folks to just express a different side of your musical creativity.
Well, this whole project, this whole Envy of None project started out very organically. It was just a casual little thing, helping a friend out, and then it developed into something else and became more serious. And it is immensely gratifying and satisfying for me as a musician and a songwriter to work in this context, because there is total freedom. I get to pursue the kind of sounds that I think are applicable to the material. So it's a whole different mental exercise for me working on this material. Getty and I started writing together when we were, I don't know, 14 years old, I guess. And we are best friends. And I love the guy so much. He's, means so much to me. And we've had this amazing experience of working together as well as being buddies. I talk to Ged, every couple of days or so. We try to get together for dinner. That's been a more challenging thing lately, but we did get out once recently, and it's great because mostly we're pals. And if there's something that comes up in the future, an opportunity for us to do something, we'll decide over a cup of coffee what that'll be. But there's no urgency, or there's no pre-planned thing now. He's doing whatever he's doing. I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and we keep each other informed and stuff like that. But God, we had such a great history and did so much great stuff together. It's not really a big deal if for the rest of our lives we're just best friends.
Too quick.
I know Rush fans are a unique bunch, and love them, and certainly everything that we've always done to satisfy ourselves before anybody else. And I think Rush fans understood that, and we're always very supportive, very critical at times too, but always supportive. And that was the nature of our relationship with our fans. It was a really good two-way relationship. But I think really Rush ended in 2015. There's no way Rush will ever exist again because Neil's not here to be a part of it. And that's not to say that we can't do other things, and we can't do things that benefit our communities and all of that. I have lots of plans for that sort of thing that don't, necessarily include Getty. So, I get asked this all the time. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Who knows? All I know is we still love each other, and we're still very, very good friends, and we always will be.
Yeah, well, and that's extremely important. Okay, tough question for you, Alex. You got a favorite Rush album? After some time has passed and you look back on the catalog, is there one for you that if somebody listening to this right now never heard of Rush, some young kid, like who's this guy Eddie Trunk talking to this guy Alex Lifeson about this band Rush that he was in? Where do you send them?
Are you a family man? Do you have kids?
Yes.
Who's your favorite kid?
Good one.
That's what it's like. If I look back at all our records, there are things that I really love about some of them. There are things that I think we could have done better. There are things that irritate me. it's just like having a kid. There's, if I had to pick a record that I would say for a non-listener to introduce themselves to Rush, it would probably be Moving Pictures, because there's something about that record that's indescribable. It's the energy on it and the way it feels, and the way those songs all developed and the cool stories that they became. It's a very cinematic uh, record. Certainly, Grace Under Pressure was such a difficult record. If I was talking about that to somebody who'd never heard us, I would explain what we went through, the hard times, the the tough being in the studio working every single day for 4 months, and the weather was awful, and their co-producer was not what we expected, and the workload was terrible. But it's all part of that growing process, and that leads to this one and this one and this one and this one. Same with Vapor Trails. That's such a dark, sorrowful period in our history, yet the experience of making that record and those songs and how difficult it all was, that it leaves scars, but they're scars that you end up being proud of. By far, Moving Pictures was the easiest, most satisfying, fun record we ever made. But that's not the criteria for why you love a piece of music. I think the harder stuff resonates with you as a writer more than anything. And I got to say, Clockwork Angels, it came such a long way in that period and represented so many things to us. And now, in retrospect, being the last album, that song, The Garden, being the last song, it's the most appropriate last song for a last record that anybody could ever think of. So it all seems like it fell into place in a nice way for us.
Well, Nick Raskulinecz is a regular listener of this radio show, so I'm sure he's listening right now and probably loves that you just said that.
Boosh.
I'm going to get a text from him any second saying, "Go, Alex." I was glad that was in there. And final thing, Alex, and I appreciate your time. A lot of my audience calls and asks me about this. A few years ago, it was announced in Canada that Neil's family was going to have a tribute show for him there. And that seems to have been derailed because of COVID. Were you involved in that in any way? And is that something you'd like to see happen in any way?
Oh, I think that was a thing between the family, and they had their own plans, and we had our own plans. And of course, when the pandemic started, it was right around the time that we were planning all these things. So it's put all those plans on the back burner. And really, until we are completely open, we don't really know what the situation is with that. So we'll just remain open to it.
Okay, cool. Well, I got to tell you, it's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to hear you, and it's wonderful to hear you making music. I mean, I know I speak for all the fans. Hearing you play guitar again is a wonderful thing. I hope we get some live. I mean, I'd love to see you even in a small place. It'd be, Andy is an old friend, Andy Curran, and I loved Coney Hatch. Unfortunately, they didn't make it here in America, but they're still around. They did a stream recently that I helped them out with. And I love Andy to death. And I know he's worked with you for a long time. So I think it's great you're working with him. And I can't wait to see where this all goes. And I know Andy will be goosing you to get out there and play some shows. If I know Andy, he'd probably love to hit the road a little bit. So hopefully we get that opportunity. And I just was thinking too, speaking on the Rush side of things, the reissues of the catalog have been fantastic. Have you enjoyed doing, those reissues? Have you been actively involved in them, or you just let the label do that? But I thought they've been great.
Yeah, it's a label thing. We don't really have a lot to do with it. We are asked for approvals out of courtesy from the record company, but it's really up to them what they want to do with that stuff. However, they've done a great job. I know Moving Pictures, there's big plans for that for this 40th anniversary. So look out for that one. That'll be a good one.
Got to get a 25th anniversary on the Victor record to come out too. I can't believe that's 25 years. That's nuts.
I know. It goes so fast.
It's crazy. Well, Alex, I could talk to you forever. I appreciate you being so generous with your time. And again, everybody check out the Epiphone guitar Les Paul standard access that's out there right now. You can hear Cobble Blues and Spy House now on Alex's website. As he mentioned, he's on Instagram as well. So hit him up on social media. And I can't wait to see what the future holds. Alex, thank you so much for the time. Great to visit with you.
My pleasure, Eddie. Take care.
भूल न गई हा जान पियावा घर जाई के भूल न गई हा जान पियावा घर जाई के प्यार में तो हरे है प्यार में तो हरे हम जहर खाई के भूल न गई हा जान पियावा घर जाई के भूल न गई हा जान पियावा घर जाई के कैसे भूल पैबू जान बगिया उतलैया हो अचके में आके ऊ पकड़ल हमर बहिया हो कैसे